we have data. We have the first 6 months of data, 1 full half year is complete as it relates to Florida real estate. So we've gone through our high season, which would be January, February, March of 2024, and we have entered and we're moving through what's our off season. So if you're unfamiliar, generally speaking, you're going to think of about Thanksgiving to Easter. So when it's cold, getting cold and colder and colder up north where you live, that is our season, because everyone from up north tends to migrate downward. That's where we call them snowbirds. You fly south for the winter, and we see all of you here in Florida in those months. And then the off cycle would be, again, Easter, that back cycle around to Thanksgiving. So we have now experienced a little bit of both, and we're a half year into 2024. So we have data, we have numbers. I am excited, I have numbers, and I want to go over everything with all of you. All right, now before we jump into hard numbers, I want to answer a poll that I put out on my channel. So I asked in June of 2024, just last month, do you think that the listings in Southwest Florida through the Naples Area Board of Realtors, so that's going to cover a lot, Marco Island, Naples, Bonita Springs, Estero, Fort Myers, so that's a large portion of Southwest Florida. How much do you think the listings have either increased or decreased in June of 2024, which is going to be our off season? So the answer is they are up 59%, almost 60, 59%. So I give you all this data here on my channel because I want you to have the facts. I want you to make good decisions. I don't want anybody buying something immediately underwater. So that said, if this is the first time we're meeting, I want to introduce myself. My name is Barrett Pastor, and I've been a real estate broker for 26 years. So hopefully I'm coming to you from a place of knowledge and experience, and I can help you navigate all things Florida real estate. Also, I want to remind you that I do consultations. I do that all week long. I will leave a link right here and down in the description box. I always say, get ready, prepared. If you aren't going to buy for a year or 2 or 3 or 5, let's get you set up so that you know what you should be doing in the meantime to get prepared. So these consultations are really great to get you on the right path. And also, the other thing I do in consultation is many of you will ask sort of for a second opinion, either on an area, or maybe you'll give me your wish list of what you want and how you envision yourself living. And then we talk through what area will hit that best for you. Okay, so we are going to be talking today about 4 cities in Florida that have seen the biggest decline in value. So if you're looking for a crash, if you're looking for a bubble, if you're looking for a bubble that is slowly bursting and maybe some areas a little quicker popping than others, these are the 4 areas that statistically are seeing the worst crash in terms of pricing. Now this data is coming from Redfin and also the NAR, National Association of Realtors, and the data is matching, so I'm going to take that for what it is. I think we're accurate on this. So here are the 4 cities. So you have, theoretically, some may say the worst markets right now to buy in: Northport, Tampa, Tampa proper, not Clearwater, not St. Pete. We're talking about Tampa, Tampa proper. So Northport, Tampa, Cape Coral, which I've been telling you for a while that's a problem, and Orlando. Those are the 4 worst performing markets right now in terms of price crash. So what does that mean? Well, that means that in the last 6 months, so the opening of 2024, January 2024 to present, 6 months data is that those 4 cities are performing the worst in terms of values dropping rapidly. So I'm going to repeat them again: Northport, Tampa, Cape Coral, Orlando. Now, what I want to talk about today is, what do those 4 cities have in common? Because we're going to see if we can't figure out why this is happening. Well, the first thing that they have in common is no ocean, Gulf of Mexico, big body of water. They don't sit directly on the coast. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, you know what? I moved to Florida and I never go to the beach. But you probably moved to Florida thinking in your mind that you were going to be going to the beach. Even if you went a couple times a year, even if you went when everybody came in and visited you, you wanted to be close to that beach, whether you used it or not. So if you think about that, Northport, although pretty close to the water, you know, you can get to a beach within 20 minutes, half hour, something along those lines, depending on where you live in Northport. Orlando, you've got the same thing. You've got a little bit of a drive outside of the middle of the state into one coast or the other. Cape Coral is Cape Coral. Listen, I have a lot of videos on Cape Coral. It is well known that Cape Coral is not one of my favorites. Maybe you love it and maybe you live there, but in terms of being resorty in any kind of way, I just think it falls short. But Cape Coral is also not easily beach accessible. So you have to go look for a beach. You're about 40 minutes or so from a beach. And then Tampa, we're going to have the same thing. Yes, you have Tampa Bay, but you're not on a beach. You have to drive to another area to get to the beach. So I found it kind of intriguing. So I found that kind of interesting. Second thing, all four of these cities are primary home markets. They are not secondary home markets. And what I mean by that is you have less snowbirds. You have less people that have bought a home in the area as their second home, third home, vacation home, primary home markets predominantly. Now listen, you may own in one of these areas and it might be your second home. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist at all, but the predominance of the folks that are buying in these areas are going to utilize the residence for their primary home. You see a lot of loans in these areas, and these are going to be the areas that you should target if you're an investor or you're looking for a deal. These are where you're going to see the foreclosures. So these areas are not utilized as much for vacation rental. Now, some people will buy these for rental, but it tends to be annual renters, not snowbird renters. Again, if you are somebody that's coming to Florida because you want a resort lifestyle, you want to be close to the beach, you want all those resorty sort of features in your community, I'm not saying that these areas don't have that at all, but they have less. You can go to another area and find something that feels more resorty easier. So your Naples area, Bonita Springs area, Sarasota, Anna Maria Island, Sanibel Island, Fort Myers Beach. These are all areas that are considered second home markets. Third thing that they have in common, and we kind of touched on this is where you're going to see the foreclosures. This is where we're seeing that shadow inventory come out, where all of these foreclosures that were sort of held at bay through COVID, and as we move through changing political environment, as things changed of what a bank could do, what they couldn't do in terms of foreclosure, people that are moving through a bankruptcy process where they're untouchable, that is all shadow inventory, and guess what? It's all coming forward. Cape Coral and Tampa and Orlando, wow. I mean, the amount of foreclosures right now that I'm seeing come out of pre-foreclosure is incredible. So that's another thing you're going to have in common. And again, that speaks to the fact that these are not second home markets. These are primary residents. So you might have arms that came due where somebody fell prey to date the rate, marry the house, and now we're in divorce mode, not working out. And then the last thing is that in these four cities, Tampa, Northport, Orlando, Cape Coral, the values came up really quickly. It was like when COVID hit, it was like a wave. The values all of a sudden, especially that range that was around 300, 350, in most of these areas, I would say every one of these areas, you could get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath you know, sort of typical home, maybe a pool, maybe not a pool, with a lanai, probably not backing to water, maybe backing to a little pond, you could get a home like that for around $300,000 to $350,000. Well, when that COVID wave came through, that $300,000 to $350,000 went to $450,000 to $500,000 literally overnight. All of a sudden, the values went up, and they went up fast. The demand for these houses, people were buying them like crazy. People were bidding $100,000, $150,000 over ask. So sellers took advantage of that and said, well, you know what, I'm going to put an embarrassing, laughable number out there, and then they'd get it. And when they get it, then everybody else on the street said, well, look at that. Marge and Joe down the street, they haven't updated their house since the 90s, and look how much they got. I'm going to put my house on the market. And then they got it. So all of these values came up so quickly that it was so obvious that it was not sustainable. And you know what that means? It's not sustainable, and that's where we are right now. So those are the little holes that I always refer to, the little pinholes. Well, these 4 cities have a lot of little pinholes, so you might not see a rapid crash of numbers, although I would say if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch style home with no pool, and you back to another house, you're looking in somebody's lanai in any of these areas, it's going to be a problem to sell it because you aren't standing out as anything special, and these are not resorty areas where somebody's going to buy it because they're close to the beach and they have all these things to do and there's music every night and what they envision life to be when they move to Florida. These are the areas that are getting hit hardest because so many people, if you watch my channel, you know I've talked about this. The time frame is 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. So a lot of people become disenchanted after 1 year. If you bought pre-COVID, you're probably okay and you sold. But if you bought in that beginning of the COVID run-up and you're at that 3-year mark, which many of you are, and you want to get your home on the market, you might have overpaid. You probably overpaid, and now your neighborhood is sliding down and you're in big trouble. That's what I'm worried about, and that is why there's so many foreclosures, because some folks just feel like, you know what, I'm done here. I overpaid, I can't afford it, they're gonna drop me because my roof is 10 years old, but it's perfectly fine. I got rezoned into a floodplain. All of these things can hit you all at once, and sometimes people say, you know what, I'm going to take my hard hit now and I'm going to let it go. Now, if you're one of those people and this is resonating with you, hopefully you're in front of the curve. If you're outside of one of those cities, like let's say you're in Fort Myers, because that could be coming your way also. You know, that Fort Myers doesn't quite fall into these 4 categories, but it was number 5. I'll just like wink, wink, nod, nod on that. If you're in Fort Myers and you're like, wait a minute, I need to dodge a bullet here, I think it's a good time. It very well might be a good time to get your property on the market, because in my opinion, if you're a seller, you probably need to get your home on the market. If you're a buyer, you probably need to hold tight, because I think 2025, we're going to see this exemplified many times over.